Well, you just got a big budget increase, a big tax increase during the St. Valentine's Day massacre down at Toronto City Hall. Could we be seeing another one due to FIFA? Hi, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun. Joining me to talk about what's happening down at City Hall is Beaches-East York Councillor Brad Bradford. Brad, I want to ask you about this latest thing with FIFA. Costs are going up dramatically. Now, look, I always looked at this deal and thought, sure, it'd be great to have the World Cup. I love football, soccer as much as anyone. Maybe not as much as my brother, but a lot. And it'd be fine, but we know costs are going to be crazy. And the latest agenda item at City Hall, costs have gone up from 300 million to 380 million. That's quite the jump.
Yeah, it's a significant increase, and it comes at a time when we have an affordability challenge here in the city of Toronto. It's never been more expensive to live here, and Mayor Chow has made that more expensive with her record-breaking 9.5% tax increase. So, this is one that we are going to have to watch very closely. I think the mayor and the administration is going to need to wrap their arms around the FIFA World Cup to make sure that we are doing everything we can to control those costs, but it's awkward in the timing. The legacy of these sort of things is that those costs have a tendency to go up, and certainly we are still dealing with record inflation, construction costs that are up, labor costs that are up, and it could be a very expensive event as a result.
So the my understanding is that we can't really get out of it. And that's a position that Olivia Chow was originally taking. She didn't want the World Cup here. She didn't want the city as part of it. She didn't want to pay for it. Now she's in office and she's defending Toronto being part of the World Cup, probably because she's seen the contract. She knows what those breakup fees are. And to back out now, it's kind of like, I believe it was Shakespeare and Macbeth talking about halfway through the bloody river, you may as well keep going through. That's kind of the situation the city's in. Would we be better off cutting and running, or are we in too deep?
I think that the World Cup is coming to Toronto, and in fact, part of this report indicates that we will be getting an additional game. They were originally predicting 5 games; it will now be 6. And again, I'm sure when it gets here in 2026, we're all going to be really excited about that. It is a partnership with all three levels of government, but a lot of people don't have confidence in the city to manage these sorts of big major projects. Expenditures get out of control, and there's not really enough scrutiny on those things to make sure that we are fighting for taxpayer dollars and getting good value. It will be fantastic when the World Cup is here, I'm sure. But you look at the economic benefits. While it will be great for the city of Toronto. Those dollars, the hundreds of millions that will be spent here in the city, a lot of that goes to the federal and the provincial government.
Hold on, explain that for a minute, because I don't think a lot of people realize they don't think governments benefit from this, they just pay. So you've got these 6 games coming. There's going to be a lot of construction. There's going to be a lot of improvements made, not only to BMO Field, but other venues, event spaces, things like that. There'll be a lot of money being spent. How does it end up? How does some of that end up back with the federal and provincial governments, but not the city?
Well, we will be making investments in our facilities. BMO Field is owned by the City of Toronto. There's a practice facility that will need to be upgraded. Those will be benefits that stick with the city. And for the weeks all around World Cup, those hotels in the downtown core, those will be booked solid. Our small businesses and restaurants, they will be packed. We will have people visiting the city from across the country and, in fact, around the world. And that's what's so special about World Cup. It is the most global event, that we have in the world. And so all eyes will be on Toronto, and that's really positive. But those dollars that are spent, whether that's hotel nights or in restaurants or at the bar or booking flights or at the airport, lots of dollars will be spent. But of course, the primary benefactor of that, it is the small business community here, it is the hotel operators, but the tax that is collected on those purchases, that of course goes to the provincial and federal government. That doesn't come to the city of Toronto. So when we are paying for these investments, when we are the host city, We're largely doing that off of a property tax base. That's a regressive tax. Mayor Chow just instituted a record-breaking 9.5% property tax increase. It's not the best tool to pay for these sorts of large-scale global sporting events, and so we
So,
will have to work with our partners at the feds and the province to pay
so
for it.
really the federal and provincial government should be footing more of the bill because they're going to get some of the benefit.
Yeah, they will get the lion's share of revenue associated with the event will go to the coffers in the provincial and
Yeah,
federal.
and we're talking GST, PST, we're talking, that's for the hotel rooms and the restaurants, but also
Airport fees.
also on the goods and the contracts, the services that are provided around this, the people working will on these projects, there'll be extra jobs, that's extra income tax. They're the beneficiaries, but we're stuck with it. So let's hope that they manage some costs. I'm not overly hopeful because look, I've covered City Hall in Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Hamilton. I've covered federal budgets more than I can count, provincial budgets in Ontario and Quebec more than I can count. Your budget planning process at Toronto City Hall is bizarre, antiquated, and opaque. You guys are baking a cake and not knowing what's going in on it. It's absolutely bizarre to watch. And, as a taxpayer, it was frustrating for me watching the debate and a few months ago, you arguing for a core services review. Let's see if we actually are getting value for the money. And it was voted down handily. I mean, you weren't close to winning on that one. That's sad as a taxpayer. I mean, we seem to be able to spend money while claiming that we're broke all the time at Toronto City Hall.
Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of people in this building that are happy to increase taxes and go out and spend that money. But the tough work in budgeting is not spending other people's money; it's finding savings. And we had called for a core services review back in the fall as part of our long-term financial plan. That was voted down, as you indicated, by council. And it's the same council that voted to, 5, 6, 7 different ways to increase taxes. Another thing coming in front of the executive committee and council this month is a parking tax on parking lots. And that was something from the fall that people enthusiastically supported and now is in front of us with an implementation plan.
So,
And so I
hold on. This is over and above what was in the budget. They're now looking at bringing in a parking lot tax, which I heard about at the time. And the advocates that were pushing for it said this should apply to not just privately owned parking lots where people pay, but also to schools, which means some of our education money would be going to pay the city for a school parking lot. And also churches, synagogues, mosques, any places of worship would have to pay a parking lot tax. Does it go that far? Do you know?
It certainly could, and it will depend on how it's implemented. Now, this is nothing that I would ever support. I think it's a silly tax. I think it disproportionately impacts our small business community. And for the advocates out there that say this is a way to get people out of cars and to shift transportation patterns, I mean, it's ridiculous because the small business doesn't actually have the ability to even pass that tax on to the consumer. You are paying the tax on that parking spot, whether or not anybody's using it. And so it really is just another tax on our small business community, on those strip plazas, on those mom and pops, at a time when they're really struggling right now. They had support from the provincial and federal government, of course, during the pandemic. All of those supports have been turned off. Inflation is still up, costs are still up, and disposable income is down. And we are now going to levy another tax on them for having a parking space where consumers could actually come to their business to support them. It's just ludicrous, and I think it will actually penalize people who are investing in this city and make markets outside of Toronto more competitive and compelling for entrepreneurs to invest their time and money elsewhere.
It's utterly bizarre to me. If someone like me says, "Oh, there's a war on the car," we get told that's ridiculous, that's not happening. And yet proposals like this, planning department decisions, it seems to be a constant war on the car. And look, I say this as someone whose car is parked most of the time because I live downtown, I take the subway, I walk, I take the streetcar. driving is a very small part of my life, but driving is still part of my life, just like an awful lot of people in the city. You at times don't have another option. Uh, Transit is not always, feasible for depending on what you're doing, or you're a big cyclist, you can't cycle to everything. Um,
No, and I don't, and it is an ideological view. There absolutely is one that is anti-car bias, and you know what? I point out it's actually you're in a very privileged position if you live on higher order transit, if you live on the subway line, or you live on the streetcar, or you're downtown where walking or riding a bike is an option for you. You know, during the campaign, I heard from lots of folks, out in Scarborough, Rexdale, North York, that's not an option that's available to them. They're not driving a car because it's a pleasant experience in Toronto. It is a horror show. There's
yeah.
nothing more frustrating than that, and it's time away from your work. It's time away from your family. They're in a car because they have to be, not because they want to be. So this ideological view held by some of the folks in leadership positions down here, the war on the car mentality, there is some truth to that. And I just think we have to recognize people are going to be in cars in this city for a long time. We are undergoing a shift where we're trying to build more transit infrastructure. This provincial government has invested more energy and more dollars in moving that stuff forward. But as we can see, it takes time and it's a very painful experience. In the interim, we should try and do things to facilitate people coming back to work, facilitate people getting across all 640 square kilometers of the city, not making it more time consuming, frustrating, or expensive for them.
All right, Brad Bradford, Councillor, Beaches-East York, thanks so much for your time. Keep up the good fight down at City Hall.
See you soon, Brian.
All right, let us know what you think of what you just heard. A parking tax. Oh, drop a comment down below, share this on social media, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.